I jolted awake to a sky-shattering scream right outside my front yard. Not the usual kind of yell, but the sort of sound like someone was starring in a low-budget horror flick. I stumbled out of bed, yanked the curtains aside, and there was Linda Baxter, self-proclaimed queen of the Meadowview neighborhood, standing at the edge of my garden. Her face was red as an overripe tomato from my vegetable patch, arms flailing, mouth shrieking something about an outrage. But that wasn't even the best part. Behind her was a police car, lights flashing, with an officer who looked like he just wanted to get out of there fast. My name's Ethan Walsh, an ordinary guy who just wants to live quietly. I moved to Meadowview, a suburb in California, for the fresh air and to tend to my little front yard garden. My garden's nothing fancy, a few tomato beds, some lettuce, a patch of bright yellow sunflowers, and the centerpiece, a metal turtle statue I picked up at a flea market. It's a bit quirky, I know, but it makes me happy. All I want is to grow my veggies, grill some meat on weekends, and steer clear of trouble. But in Meadowview, peace is a pipe dream when you've got the Homeowners Association, or HOA, run by Linda Baxter. Linda is every resident's living nightmare. A former real estate agent with a fake smile, she rules the HOA like it's her personal kingdom. She measures people's lawn grass with a ruler, fines you if your house isn't painted the approved shade of beige, and sends threatening letters if your car has a speck of dust. I've tried to avoid her, but this morning, Linda had clearly set her sights on me. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. I hurriedly threw on a shirt, grabbed my still-warm coffee mug, and stepped outside.
Eee!
Linda spun around, her eyes blazing. "Ethan Walsh," she shrieked, as if I'd just vandalized the entire neighborhood.
Eee!
"This garden is a disgrace." I blinked, glancing at my tomato beds and the metal turtle. "A disgrace," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Linda, it's just vegetables and a statue." She crossed her arms, a smug smile creeping onto her face like a cat toying with a mouse. "Oh, I know," she said, her voice eerily sweet, "but this garden is ruining the neighborhood's aesthetic." I frowned, setting my coffee down. "Ruining? According to who? Who's complaining about a few tomato plants?" She waved a hand, feigning mystery. "That's confidential," she said, then glared at the garden as if it had personally insulted her entire family tree. "But the HOA has decided this garden doesn't meet standards. I'll need to keep the police here to ensure you don't continue violating." I looked at the officer, whose badge read Dave Carter, hoping for some reason. Dave stepped forward, looking awkward. "Hi, Mr. Walsh," he said. "Mrs. Baxter says your garden violates HOA rules. I'm just checking if there's anything illegal." "Illegal?" I said, pointing at the vegetable beds. "Do you see anything wrong with lettuce and sunflowers?" Dave walked around, shrugged. "Mrs. Baxter, city law allows planting in private yards. I don't see an issue." Linda's face stiffened, but she quickly regained her arrogance. "Fine," she said, her voice icy. "But the HOA has the right to inspect further. This garden is substandard, and I'll make sure it's gone." She glared at me, her eyes flashing with menace. "Just wait." As Dave drove off, Linda lingered, staring at the garden like she was plotting its destruction. I picked up my coffee, trying to stay calm, but inside I was fuming. I didn't want trouble, but Linda had just declared war. If she thought she could bully me and my garden, she was dead wrong. I'd protect it, and I knew I had to play smart. After Linda left, I stood there, still clutching my now cold coffee, looking at my garden. The tomato beds, sunflower patch, and metal turtle stood quietly, oblivious to the drama Linda had brought. But in my head, everything was boiling. I'm not one for fights, but the way Linda looked at my garden, like it was a stain on her perfect kingdom, made it impossible to sit still. She wanted to play power games? Fine, but I wouldn't let her win easily. The next few days were paperwork hell. My mailbox turned into a battleground of HOA letters, each stamped with Linda Baxter's bold red signature. The first demanded $200 for landscaping standard violations. The second upped the fine to $300, citing the garden lowering Meadowview's property values. The third, I didn't even bother reading fully, just caught the phrase unapproved turtle statue. Seriously? A tiny metal turtle was worth a whole page of threats. I tried contacting the HOA, hoping to talk to Linda directly and find a compromise. I called their office, but got a cold voicemail directing me to email. I wrote a long email, explaining my garden harmed no one, that I just wanted to grow vegetables and live quietly. The reply came hours later, short as a slap. Your garden does not comply with HOA regulations. Remove it within 48 hours, or face further action. Signed, Linda Baxter, HOA President. I wanted to scream. Further action? Did she think she was Meadowview's sheriff? But I knew Linda. She thrived on drama, loved watching people lose their cool so she could slap on more fines. If I snapped, she'd win. So I took a deep breath, stuffed the letters in a drawer, and decided to figure out what I was up against. I ran into Tom Rivera, my next-door neighbor, while he was mowing his lawn. Tom, a retired teacher with silver hair, always wore plaid shirts, and had a smile that made you think everything would be okay. I told him about Linda and the pile of fines. Tom snorted, shaking his head. "You're not the first, Ethan," he said, leaning on his mower. "Linda once fined me $50 for leaving my trash bin out an hour past pickup. She runs this place like a boot camp." "So what'd you do?" I asked, hoping for a spark of wisdom. Tom shrugged. "Paid it to keep the peace. But you're different. You don't seem like the type to back down. Why not dig into the rules?" Linda loves quoting HOA regs, but I bet she doesn't know city law. Tom's idea flipped a switch in my head. If Linda wanted to play the rules game, I'd play back my way. That night, I sat at my computer, a fresh coffee beside me, and started digging. I skimmed Meadowview's HOA bylaws, a dense mess of flowery jargon Linda probably used to scare people. Then I moved to California land use laws, researching everything about private yard rights. My eyes burned from the screen, but I didn't stop. Something in me stirred, not just anger, but a drive to prove Linda wrong. Buried in the info, I found a small but golden nugget. City law allowed temporary property protection structures, as long as they weren't a public hazard. My brain kicked into overdrive. Protect the garden. Maybe not just a fence, maybe something bigger, crazier. I didn't know exactly what yet, but an idea was forming, and I smiled for the first time since Linda showed up in my yard. If she wanted war, I'd show her how well I could play. After a night scouring California land use laws, my head buzzed like I'd run an internet marathon. But that tiny detail about temporary property protection structures kept circling. It wasn't just a loophole, it was a wide-open door to teach Linda Baxter a lesson. I sat on my couch, staring out the window at my garden. The tomato beds, sunflowers and metal turtles stood there, peaceful and innocent, unaware of the paper storm Linda was throwing at me. But I knew one thing: if I wanted to keep this garden, I had to do something bold, something she'd never see coming. The next morning, I sipped coffee and called Tom Rivera. He was watering his yard, still in his signature plaid shirt. "Tom," I said, barely hiding a grin, "if you had to protect a garden from the HOA, what would you do?" Tom wiped his brow, looking at me like I'd asked how to build a spaceship. "You serious?" "Linda doesn't mess around, Ethan. She once got a neighbor to ditch their chicken coop after one meeting." "I'm not kidding," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I found a law. I can build something to protect my garden, as long as it's temporary and legal. I'm thinking, a moat." Tom blinked, then burst out laughing so loud his dog started barking. "A moat? Like a medieval castle? You're nuts, but I love it." The word moat sounded crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. Not a dry ditch like in sword fight movies. I wanted a water moat, with aquatic plants, goldfish, and a small bridge for access. Legal, beautiful, and guaranteed to drive Linda insane. But ideas are one thing, making them real is another. I'm no builder, so I needed help. I searched online and contacted Joe Martinez, a local contractor known for quirky projects. When I met Joe at a coffee shop near Meadowview, he, a burly guy with a bushy beard and a sly grin, looked at me like I was spinning a fairy tale. "A water moat," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Around your garden, to fend off the HOA lady? Man, I like you already." I spread out my rough sketch on the table, a moat circling my front yard, about a meter deep, wide enough to deter jumpers, with a foldable metal bridge. Joe nodded, pointing at the sketch. Doable, but it'll cost you. And you sure it's legal? I don't want trouble with that Baxter woman. I checked, I said, handing him a copy of the city law. As long as it's temporary and safe, we're good. Can you do it? Joe laughed. Oh, I can do it. But fair warning, the whole neighborhood's gonna talk about you. I just signed the contract with Joe when trouble hit. Somehow, Linda got wind of my plan. I was checking my mailbox when I spotted her at the street corner, chatting with Greg Thompson, an HOA lackey who followed her like a puppy. Greg's the type to snitch if you leave shoes outside, and I'd bet he tipped Linda off about Joe's trucks near my house. That afternoon, an email from Linda landed in my inbox, colder than Arctic ice. Mr. Walsh, we've received reports of unapproved activity at your property. Any garden changes must be HOA approved. I advise you to stop before facing legal consequences. Signed, Linda Baxter, HOA President. I read it, smiling. Legal consequences. She had no idea how prepared I was. I texted Joe, start digging. Linda just fired her first shot. My garden was about to get a new guardian, a water moat, and I couldn't wait to see Linda's face when she saw it. When Joe Martinez and his crew showed up with a mini excavator and a pile of gear, I knew things were about to get fun. My garden, with its tomato beds, sunflowers and trusty metal turtle, was about to become the talk of Meadowview. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching Joe direct his team like a conductor. Dig a meter deep, 1.5 wide, he shouted. We're building a water moat, not a duck pond. My plan wasn't just to dig a ditch. I wanted a proper moat, with water piped from the neighborhood's irrigation system, aquatic plants for a natural vibe, and a few goldfish for fun. The centerpiece was a foldable metal bridge linking the garden to the sidewalk, raised and lowered by cables. Joe thought I was crazy, but his grin showed he loved the madness. You're gonna drive this neighborhood nuts, he said, shaking his head as I showed him my sketch. Work started at dawn, and soon all of Meadowview knew. Neighbors trickled by, gawking at the digging. A few kids ran past, cheering when they saw the dirt piles. Ethan's house is a castle now, one yelled, making me laugh. Tom Rivera stopped by, holding a water bottle, eyes gleaming. You're really doing it? He asked. Linda's gonna lose it when she sees this. Let her, I said, shrugging. She can't touch me if I play by the rules. By day 3, the moat took shape. We piped in water, added mini water lilies from Home Depot, and released a school of shimmering goldfish. The foldable bridge was installed, a sturdy black metal frame with cables I could pull to raise it. I tested it, grinning at the satisfying creak as it lifted. My garden was now a mini fortress, and I couldn't stop smiling. But Linda Baxter, of course, didn't let me savor the win long. I was checking the lilies when I heard high heels clacking on the sidewalk. I looked up to see Linda at the moat's edge, her face redder than ever, arms crossed tight like she wanted to strangle someone. Ethan Walsh, she screeched, her voice so shrill the goldfish probably flinched. What is this? You dug a pit in your front yard. Not a pit, I said, biting back a laugh. It's a water moat, a legal garden protection measure. Legal, she hissed, pointing at the bridge like it offended humanity. You can't turn your yard into a fish pond. This is Meadowview, not a medieval movie. I can, I said, keeping my voice steady. City law allows temporary structures to protect property. I've got permits. Linda nearly choked, her eyes boring into me like lasers. Just wait, she growled. I'll call the city inspector. This will be torn down before you can add another fish. Hours later, a city-logoed car parked out front. Inspector Lisa Wong, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, stepped out with a clipboard. Linda stood nearby, her smug smile screaming victory. Joe and I met Lisa, showing her the permits and sketch. She circled the moat, checked the bridge, even peered at the goldfish. Finally, she turned, shrugging. Everything's in order, she said flatly. No violations, enjoy your project. Linda's face looked like it had been slapped. But it's a hazard, she stammered. Kids will fall in, it'll flood the neighborhood. Lisa shook her head. No evidence of danger, Mrs. Baxter. File a specific complaint through the office if you have one. She drove off, leaving Linda speechless, mouth agape. I looked at Linda, shrugged. Have a nice afternoon, I said, heading inside to hide my grin. The moat was done, and Linda lost round 1. But I knew she wouldn't stop, she'd be back, and I had to be ready. The bridge creaked as I raised it, and I thought the fun's just starting. After Inspector Lisa Wong left, I thought I'd get a few days to watch my goldfish swim in peace. But Linda Baxter wasn't one to give up. My moat, with its mini lilies, foldable bridge, and metal turtle standing guard, became Meadowview's hot topic. Kids ran by every afternoon, shouting Ethan's castle and tossing pebbles to spook the fish. Neighbors whispered, some curious, some wary. But I knew Linda was scheming, and she didn't keep me waiting long. It started with a new HOA letter, thicker than usual, with Linda's glaring red signature. She called an emergency meeting to discuss serious violations at 12 Meadow Lane, my house. The letter listed charges: public endangerment, aesthetic damage, and funniest of all, community disturbance. Disturbance? If my goldfish were singing karaoke at midnight, maybe I'd agree. I stuffed the letter in a drawer, but couldn't shake a twinge of worry. Linda was going big, and I had to prepare. I told Tom Rivera about it when he stopped by with a tray of fresh-baked cookies. HOA meeting, Tom frowned, biting into a cookie. Linda's trying to rally the whole neighborhood against you. She's good at this. Last time, she got everyone to sign a petition against a playground, because it was too noisy. So what do? I asked, glancing at the bridge outside. She won't stop, will she? Tom smirked. Nope, but you've got an edge. That moat's making her look foolish. Stay strong, and don't let her see you sweat. I grabbed my phone, and posted on the neighborhood's X group, explaining that the moat was a legal way to protect my garden from overzealous HOA control. I added photos, blooming lilies, sparkling fish, and the shiny bridge. The post racked up dozens of likes, mostly from residents I'd never met. One comment read, "Thanks for standing up to Linda." I smiled, but knew Linda would see it, and she wouldn't be happy. Sure enough, Linda went dirtier. One morning, I found a landscaping company parked out front, 2 guys with shovels ready to tear up my garden. I ran out, yelling, "Stop, who told you to do this?" One shrugged, showing me a contract signed by Linda Baxter, ordering removal of the violating area. Thank God Tom, walking by, tipped me off before they touched my tomatoes. I sent them packing, but my heart was pounding. Linda had gone too far. I played it safe, installing 3 security cameras around the moat, one aimed at the bridge. If Linda wanted to play dirty, I'd have proof. Then I got a surprise from Mrs. Helen Guin, an elderly woman down the street, famous for her secret rose garden. She stopped by, holding a small pot of water lilies. "Heard about your trouble," she said softly. "Keep that garden, young man. Linda's not the boss of this place." She winked, left the lilies, and I felt a warmth. I had allies, even quiet ones. On X, my post spread beyond Meadowview. A California anti-HOA group shared it, calling me the moat hero. I laughed at the comments, but felt the pressure. I didn't want to be a hero, I just wanted my garden. But Linda wasn't giving me a choice. She sent another email, sharp as a blade. "Mr. Walsh, the HOA meeting will decide your garden's fate. I suggest you cooperate, or face litigation." I read it, gripping my phone. Litigation? Did she think I'd scare easy? I looked at the moat, where Helen's lilies were blooming. Linda wanted war, and I'd show her how ready I was. The bridge stood poised to rise, and I knew the battle was just beginning. I thought the moat would make Linda Baxter back off, but I underestimated her stubbornness. After the landscaping company nearly wrecked my tomatoes, I knew she wasn't stopping at letters or threats. The moat, with its lilies, glittering goldfish, and metal bridge, was now a Meadowview icon. But to Linda, it was a thorn in her side. I'd set up cameras, and that turned out to be my smartest move yet. One night, I woke to a weird noise, not Linda's screech, but something like metal clanging. I shot up, heart racing, and ran to the window. In the dim street light, a figure lurked near the moat. I opened my camera app, zoomed in, and couldn't believe it. Linda Baxter, in a black hoodie like a bargain bin ninja, holding bolt cutters to the bridge's cables. She was actually trying to sabotage my moat. I gripped my phone, torn between rage and amusement. "Linda, the HOA queen, with her fancy coffee and oversized sunglasses, sneaking around like a thief. I zoomed closer, recording every move. She yanked the cables, making the bridge tilt and crash partly into the moat, with a thud that probably freaked out the fish. Linda flinched, looked around, then bolted toward her house. I didn't hesitate. I called Dave Carter, the cop from the garden complaint. "Dave," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I caught someone vandalizing my property. I've got clear video." Dave arrived in 10 minutes, still looking like he wanted his shift to end. I showed him the footage, Linda sneaking, cutting, the bridge collapsing. Dave frowned, shaking his head. "Mrs. Baxter, unbelievable, but with this we've got enough to handle it." They knocked on Linda's door. I watched from a distance as she answered, hair a mess, still in the hoodie. "What's this about?" she yelled, faking surprise. I was sleeping. But when Dave asked about the vandalism, she stammered. "I was just checking if the moat was safe. It's a neighborhood hazard." Dave wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Baxter, the camera shows you cutting cables. That's property damage. I'll need you to explain at the station." Linda glared at me from afar, eyes blazing, but I just shrugged, hiding a smirk. Dave took her for a report, and I knew the neighborhood would buzz by morning. I didn't let this ruin the moat. The next day, I called Joe Martinez to fix the bridge. She cut the cables. Joe laughed, shaking his head. "Baxter's a character. Don't worry, I've got a better idea." He suggested upgrading the bridge to an electronic system, controlled by a button, both convenient and sure to annoy Linda more. I agreed, though my wallet groaned. By afternoon, the new bridge hummed smoothly, zipping up like it was taunting Linda from a distance. I added a sign by the moat, Meadowview Moat, Goldfish, welcome Linda not so much. The neighborhood kids loved it, giggling as they ran by. Mrs. Helen Dewen stopped by with homemade bao buns. "Heard about last night," she said, eyes twinkling. "You did good, Ethan. Linda needs to know she's not the boss here." Word spread fast. By evening, Meadowview was abuzz about Linda's sneak attack. Some neighbors, once scared of her, now looked at me differently, like I was the guy who dared defy the queen. My ex-post had hundreds of shares, with comments from across California calling Linda the Vandal Queen. I didn't want the spotlight, but it was denting her power. She'd strike back, I was sure. But with cameras, a new bridge, and the neighborhood shifting, I was ready. My moat wasn't just a pond, it was a statement, and Linda wouldn't break it easily again. After Linda Baxter's failed ninja stunt, Meadowview exploded with gossip. Neighbors whispered as they passed my house. Kids still called the moat Ethan's castle, and the goldfish seemed to swim with extra swagger. I stood on my porch, watching the new bridge glide up and down with a button, the sign Goldfish welcome Linda not so much, gleaming in the sun. But I knew Linda wouldn't quit. She'd been hauled to the station by Dave Carter for vandalism, but for someone like her, humiliation only made her more dangerous. I had to act before she struck again. I started thinking about the HOA meeting Linda had called. She'd use it to come for me, but I wasn't going to just take it. If she loved rules, I'd beat her with her own game. I called Tom Rivera, now a close ally. "Tom," I said as he stopped by with a thermos of coffee, "Linda's gearing up for a big fight. I need evidence to turn the tables." Tom frowned, pouring us both coffee. "Evidence? You've got her on video wrecking the bridge already, don't you?" "Not enough," I replied, pointing to the stack of fine letters in the drawer. "She runs the HOA like a mob boss. I bet there's something shady, wrongful fines, missing funds. If I find it, she won't have a leg to stand on." Tom nodded, his eyes lighting up. "You need an insider. Talk to Helen Nguyen. She's been in Meadowview since before Linda was president. She knows things." I visited Helen the next morning. She was pruning roses in her backyard, her smile kind but her eyes sharp. "I heard about Linda," she said, handing me a cup of tea. "She wrecked your bridge. Unbelievable. I want to stop her," I said bluntly. "Do you know anything about how she runs the HOA?" Helen paused, eyeing me for a moment. "Linda's not as careful as she thinks," she said, her voice low. "A few years back, she accidentally sent me an HOA fund statement. I kept it because it looked odd. Some expenses didn't add up. She led me inside, pulling out an old folder. I scanned it, my heart racing. There were entries for event costs totaling thousands, yet Meadowview never had big parties. Another listed business travel. Since when did the HOA need a Hawaii getaway? I snapped photos, feeling like I'd struck gold. I didn't stop there. With Tom's help, I dug through every fine letter Linda sent me and other neighbors. A pattern emerged: fines for things not in the HOA rules, like unapproved turtle statue or grass over 5 centimeters. Tom recalled Linda fining him for a crooked mailbox, even though he measured it straight. The more I dug, the clearer it was. Linda used fines to intimidate, to silence people. To be sure, I contacted Rachel Kim, an old friend who's a lawyer. I sent her the documents and the video of Linda wrecking the bridge. She called back hours later, buzzing with excitement. "Ethan, this is a goldmine," she said. "Embezzling HOA funds, invalid fines, property damage. If you present this at the HOA meeting, Linda's got no defense. But be careful, she'll do anything to flip this." Rachel advised me to prepare a sharp, concise speech to expose Linda to the neighborhood. I agreed, but Linda didn't let me rest. One afternoon, she sent a new email, accusing the Moat of pollution and threatening to call environmental inspectors. I smirked, hired an independent expert to test it. Result: the Moat water was clean enough to drink, if you didn't mind goldfish funk. I sent Linda the report with a note: "Thanks for the concern, but my fish are fine." I looked at the Moat, Helen's lilies blooming vividly. Linda thought she owned Meadowview, but I was about to show her the game had new rules. The HOA meeting was coming, and I had enough ammo to topple her throne. The HOA meeting took place in Meadowview's stuffy community room, with rows of plastic chairs and the smell of cheap coffee. I walked in, clutching the thick folder Tom and I had prepared, heart pounding but mind clear as my Moat's water. The whole neighborhood was there, from Helen Nguyen, with her cryptic smile, to Greg Thompson, Linda's lackey, glaring from the corner. Linda Baxter sat at the front table, in a jade green blazer, her smug smile like she'd already won. But I knew I had weapons she didn't expect. Linda tapped her pen, signaling silence. "We're here to address a serious issue," she said, her voice sweet but razor sharp. "Number 12, Meadow Lane, Ethan Walsh's house, has violated every HOA rule: an unapproved garden, a dangerous water moat, and clear disregard for our community." She looked at me, eyes gleaming with triumph. "I propose immediate removal of everything, or we'll pursue legal action." The room murmured. A few nodded with Linda, but I caught Helen and Tom exchanging glances. I stood, raising my hand. "I'd like to say something, if I may." Linda frowned, but couldn't refuse in front of the crowd. "Make it quick," she snapped. I set the folder on the table, my voice calm but firm. "Thanks, Mrs. Baxter. But before we talk about my garden, I'd like to ask about how the HOAs run. For instance, why did the community fund spend $5,000 on business travel, with no details?" The room went dead silent. Linda opened her mouth, but I pressed on before she could interrupt. "Or $3,000 for neighborhood events we've never seen. I have the statements here, courtesy of a kind resident." I glanced at Helen, she nodded slightly. I opened the folder, holding up pages. "And here's a receipt for a Hawaii trip, signed by Mrs. Baxter. Did the HOA pay for your vacation?" The room erupted in whispers. Greg Thompson flushed, fidgeting as he looked at Linda. She slammed the table, shouting, "You're lying. Those documents are fake." "Fake," I said, smiling. "Then why not explain the 20 baseless fines you've sent me and others, like fining Mr. Rivera for a crooked mailbox, or me for a turtle statue?" "The HOA rules don't mention turtles, Mrs. Baxter." Tom stood, his voice booming. "Ethan's right, I got fined $50 for a trash bin out an hour late. Linda uses fines to scare us." Helen spoke up, her voice soft but cutting. "She threatened me over planting roses the wrong color." "Meadowview isn't yours alone, Linda." Linda paled, her hands trembling. You're slandering me," she yelled. "I do everything for this neighborhood." I held up my phone, playing the security footage. The room's big screen showed Linda in a black hoodie, cutting the bridge cables. Gasps filled the air. An elderly woman muttered, "Good Lord," like a thief. I stopped the video, staring at Linda. Vandalism, embezzlement, bullying residents, is this how you do everything for us? Linda shot up, pointing at me. You'll pay for this, Ethan Walsh, but her voice cracked, and no one listened. An older man raised his hand. I move to vote Mrs. Baxter out right now. Cheers echoed. Linda looked around, panic in her eyes, but no one backed her, not even Greg. The vote was swift. Every resident but one blank ballot chose to oust Linda. She stood, lips pursed, then stormed out, papers scattering behind her. The door slammed, and the room exhaled like a storm had passed. As people clapped, I sat, feeling relief mixed with disbelief. Tom slapped my shoulder, laughing. You did it, Ethan. Helen winked, handing me a cookie from her bag. I looked out the window, picturing the moat with its lilies and goldfish, celebrating with me. Linda was done, but I knew she wouldn't vanish quietly. Still, tonight I'd won, and Meadowview would never be the same. After Linda Baxter fled the HOA meeting, Meadowview's community room felt brighter, despite the flickering fluorescence. People clapped, laughed, and for the first time, I saw neighbors look at each other with real joy, not caution. I stood there, still gripping the folder, feeling like I'd just finished a race. My moat, with its lilies, goldfish, and foldable bridge, hadn't just saved my garden, it toppled Linda's throne. But I knew the story wasn't over. Linda wasn't the type to slink away silently. Days later, the fallout hit her like a tidal wave. Thanks to the documents I presented, police launched an investigation into Linda's HOA embezzlement. Rachel Kim, my lawyer friend, connected with a firm handling community fraud, and they dove in like sharks smelling blood. Turns out, Linda didn't just splurge HOA funds on a Hawaii trip. She bought designer bags, paid for spa days, and even funneled cash to an offshore account, what Rachel called a giant red flag. Linda was summoned, fined tens of thousands, and ordered to repay the HOA. To cover it, she had to list her Meadowview house for sale. Linda's house, a gaudy mansion with white columns and manicured grass, sat on the market for months. No one wanted the HOA Queen's Castle, as the kids called it. She sold at a loss, and I heard she moved far away, probably to dodge the neighborhood's stares. The day she left, I stood on my porch, watching her moving truck pull out of Meadow Lane. Linda glared at me from a distance, but her eyes had no power. I raised my coffee mug, a wordless goodbye. She'd lost, and this time for good. Meadowview started to change. After Linda's ousting, the HOA all but collapsed. Greg Thompson, her lapdog, apologized publicly, and stepped back, face red as my tomatoes. Residents held another meeting, Linda free, and we voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. No one needs someone measuring grass with a ruler, Tom Rivera said, and the room roared with laughter. Instead, we formed a voluntary group where people decided their own gardens, paint colors, or even left bins out a day without fear of fines. My moat became an accidental star. One morning, Amy Chen, a local reporter, knocked on my door. Mr. Walsh, she said, holding a recorder, your moat story's spreading across California. Can I interview you? I agreed, though shyly. I told her about the garden, Linda, and how the moat accidentally became a symbol of resistance. The article ran with the headline, Moat Hero, the fight for freedom in Meadowview, making me blush but proud. Neighbors from other communities visited, snapping photos of the bridge, asking for tips on growing lilies. To celebrate, I hosted a garden party out front. I set up tables, laid out tomatoes and lettuce from my garden, and Helen brought a tray of cookies. Tom supplied beer, Joe Martinez, chipped in lemonade, and kids ran around the moat, trying to catch goldfish with homemade nets. Helen stood beside me, watching everyone laugh. You changed this place, Ethan, she said, handing me a small rose plant. Now everyone wants their own garden. I looked around, seeing faces once cowed by Linda now lifted, chatting freely. The neighborhood wasn't her perfect painting anymore, it was alive, messy, real. The moat sparkled in the sun, lilies swaying, the bridge standing as a reminder that sometimes, to protect what you love, you do something wild. Linda was gone, and Meadowview was ours, not hers. I stood by the moat, watching the goldfish gleam under the sunset, feeling everything had shifted. My garden, with its tomatoes, sunflowers, and innocent metal turtle, was still there, but it meant more now. It wasn't just veggies, it was proof a regular guy like me could stand up to a system. Linda Baxter was gone, Meadowview had changed, and the Moat, that once crazy idea, was now the heart of the neighborhood. I decided to keep the Moat as a permanent part of the house. Joe Martinez helped reinforce it, adding decorative stones around the edge, so kids wouldn't slip. I put up a small sign by the bridge, Meadowview Moat, freedom from here on. Every time I raised the bridge, hearing the electric zip, I smiled. It wasn't just mechanics, it was a reminder I'd won, and not just for me. The neighborhood felt alive, neighbors started gardens, unafraid of grass measurers or paint checkers. Tom Rivera grew a pumpkin patch, bragging like he'd won gold. Helen Nguyen opened up her rose garden, now bursting with colors Linda once called gaudy. Even Greg Thompson, after apologizing, painted his door blue, a small rebellion that made everyone chuckle. Meadowview wasn't Linda's perfect picture, it was messy, vibrant, realer than ever. I started a small blog, sharing the Moat story and tips for fighting overbearing HOAs. I didn't expect it to spread. People from California, even nationwide, emailed me for advice on lilies or local law loopholes. One wrote, "Thanks for reminding me my home's mine, it warmed me. I'm no hero, just a guy who loves his garden, but if my story helped someone, that's enough." One evening, as I watered plants, Tom and Helen stopped by. Tom held a beer, Helen a tiny cactus. "A gift for your castle," she said, winking. We sat on the porch, watching the Moat reflect the moon. "You know," Tom said, sipping his beer, "I always thought someone would take Linda down. Didn't expect it'd be a Moat and a tomato guy." I laughed. "Sometimes you gotta get creative." Helen nodded, gazing at the neighborhood, now glowing with fearless homes. "You gave us courage, Ethan. Meadowview's a home now, truly." I looked at them, then the garden, feeling I finally belonged. The Moat started as a joke to save tomatoes, but it did more. It brought us together, reclaimed our freedom. Linda might have called the cops over veggies, but I turned my garden into a symbol, and nothing could erase that. As Tom and Helen left, I stayed by the Moat, hose in hand. Helen's lilies bloomed, goldfish swam, and the turtle seemed to smile. I snapped a photo of the Moat under the moonlight, posting it to my blog with the caption, "Home is where you fight to keep it." Then I went inside, closed the door, and for the first time since moving to Meadowview, I felt truly at peace. The story of Ethan Walsh and his Meadowview Moat reflects many facets of life in the U.S. today, especially the tension between personal freedom and imposed community rules, often seen in neighborhoods with homeowners associations, HOAs. In the story, Ethan faces Linda Baxter, who uses her HOA power to control his garden, from tomato beds and sunflowers to a metal turtle statue, just because it doesn't fit her aesthetic standards. This mirrors how many U.S. HOAs enforce strict, sometimes absurd rules, like banning vegetable gardens, or limiting house paint colors, stifling creativity and freedom. Ethan doesn't back down. He studies local laws, builds a legal moat with lilies, goldfish, and a foldable bridge, turning his garden into a symbol of resistance. This reflects the American spirit, defending personal rights with smarts and persistence, not violence. Exposing Linda's embezzlement, from Hawaii trips to designer bags, and getting her ousted also highlights real issues of abuse in small U.S. communities, where transparency and accountability are often ignored. Ethan Walsh's story teaches us that protecting personal freedom in a community takes patience, knowledge, and creativity, especially in the U.S., where rules like HOAs can drown out individual voices. When Ethan faces Linda Baxter, who tries to force him to remove his garden with its tomatoes and turtle, he doesn't lash out but studies California law to build a legal moat, turning a wild idea, lilies, goldfish, a foldable bridge, into a shield. The lesson: when unfair rules hit, learn your rights. In the U.S., local and state laws often protect property rights, but you have to dig, like Ethan did with temporary structures. His exposing Linda's embezzlement of HOA funds for Hawaii trips or bogus fines, like crooked mailboxes, helped dissolve the HOA, creating a self-governing community. You can do this by attending community meetings, questioning budgets, and demanding accountability from leaders. Finally, Ethan's garden party, sharing veggies and bonding with Tom Rivera and Helen Muin, shows the power of unity. In real life, build ties with neighbors. A plate of cookies or a friendly wave can spark big support when you fight. Be like Ethan, smart, persistent, and turn challenges into chances to make your neighborhood vibrant, true to America's spirit of freedom. If you loved the story of the moat and my fight to save my garden, subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. Thanks for joining me in Meadowview, and see you soon for more crazy ideas.